Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. In this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, I'm so pleased to have with us award-winning anchor and reporter Stephanie Simoni. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here, Simone. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, I'm so curious, as I'm sure our listeners are. Tell us a little bit about your journey to where you currently are today. Give us a little background on your career trajectory.
Sure. Well, I started interning, of course, like most people, at a radio station in Washington, D.C. I went to school at American University. And then my first job was in Savannah, Georgia. It was the smallest city I had ever lived in. And it was a wonderful experience because I grew up in Boston. So I definitely got the whole Southern experience, charm, everything.
Nice.
Really enjoyed my time there, and really it was a great place to make mistakes, learn from them. And then from there, I went to Little Rock, Arkansas. So I kind of made my tour of the South. And then now I'm at WTNH in New Haven, Connecticut. And I've been there now almost 9 years. And
Wow.
I've really grown there. I've really built a lot of connections there. So it's been a great journey.
Wonderful. Some of the things that you're saying that's gotten me curious is it's a place to make mistakes and learn from them. Talk to us a little bit more about what you mean by that, and how would our listeners find a space that they can mess up and be okay with it?
Well, I think no matter what, you're going to make mistakes in your career. That's just bound to happen, right? And in TV news, there's a lot of factors that are outside of your control. So the best thing to do is try and control the things that you can control. I remember vividly, I was hired in Savannah, Georgia, to be a morning feature reporter, which is, covering the county fair or waking up with a baker early in the morning, showing them how they make the pies. And it just so happened that I was the only reporter on this one day that could cover a homicide press conference. And it was the first time I had covered big breaking news. And I was nervous, I think, as most people might be. I don't know. And I knew it was a way for me to show my bosses that I could handle a big story. And so I go to the press conference where the public information officer, all the mics are lined up, all the media is there, and all the other journalists from all the other stations who have been there maybe a year or two. I'm brand new, and they give all the details, the who, what, where, when, why, who it was, what they think the suspect looked like, all that information. And I'm just so nervous the whole time. I don't digest any of it. Okay. I took notes, but they didn't really make sense. And I come back to the station and they're like, okay, so what happened? And I'm like, I'm going to have to watch the tape. And, of course, and this is like this is just starting the time of, I don't even think Twitter was around yet, but Facebook was. And in the time of, I want it now, I want the information now, we need to get it out to our viewers now. And so I was like, I'm so sorry. I need to watch it again. I don't want to give you anything wrong. But yeah, so that was a big mistake. I should have been taking more notes diligently, and they needed to make sense. And I just was not at that point. I just was not ready. And now, I mean, now looking back on it, I can laugh about it. But at the time, it felt awful. Trust me, it did not feel good.
Oh, awesome. I love that story. How about your appreciation for risk? Because you talked about moving from Boston to Savannah to Arkansas. I think you said Little Rock, I
Yep.
believe you said, and back to Connecticut, back to New England. So you've been hopping around quite a bit for your career. How effective have you found that to be? And what what do you say to yourself to give yourself permission to move from location to location to grow your career?
So, well, I always tell myself I have never drowned before, so I'm not going to start now. I mean, I like, the old adage, sink or swim. Well, I just keep telling myself I've never drowned before. It's not gonna happen. It just, you don't give yourself failure as an option when you take a big risk like that. But I will say that the biggest risk I ever took was in the very beginning of my career. And you talk about the driver's seat. So this is really in the moment I knew I am in control of what I want to do, because I always knew I wanted to do TV news ever since I was a little girl, ever since I watched Oprah and the watched the 5 o'clock news after Oprah. I knew I wanted to be Oprah, or I wanted to be the lead. Like, I mean, Oprah, I loved her. I grew up watching her, and then I watched the news after her, and it just, for something, like, there was something about that hour and a half of TV news, of her, some of her amazing work, um, that I just wanted to be a part of. So, anyways, I always knew I wanted to do it. So, went to DC, got that internship, and the biggest risk I took was, I had done this internship in the top 10 market, Washington DC. It's always good to be where the king lives, as my grandmother would used to say. It's always good to be near the president, near where all the lawmakers are, especially with journalism jobs. And they offered me a job. They offered me a job to produce in Washington DC right out of school, but it was producing. It wasn't reporting. And I saw other people in the station that had gone that track, and some were still producers, some were reporters. And I just thought that was, in that in itself was like too much of a gamble for me, even though it was a job with benefits when I was 22 in Washington DC. So I said thank you so much, but I really want to do television news. That's what I want to do. And so I said no, but I didn't have a job, so I was still waiting tables. And every day I told myself I would apply to 5 jobs. And this is before you could just send off your reel with with a link. It was a tape, and you had to go to the post office every day, and you had to mail them a tape, or a CD, and I think it was a DVD. Yes, it was a DVD. It wasn't a tape, DVD. But yeah, so every day, 5 jobs. I sent out 150 envelopes with CDs and resumes, and I got 3 phone calls. One was in West Virginia, one was in Florida. I think it was a small market in Florida. I can't even remember now. But I ended up taking the one in Savannah, Georgia, because it just seemed like a good place to live, a good place to get my feet wet. I really had a good vibe from the news director, and yeah, so that was the biggest risk, and that was the time I knew, hey, I'm in control of what I want to do. I don't have to take this opportunity, and other opportunities will come. So I did not drown. I got a job. I wasn't waiting
Wow,
for tables forever.
that's awesome. It's so awesome. And I wonder if now, as you think back on your career, you were to name your career body of work, what would it be? What would be the title of the book?
Oh my gosh. I guess I don't know. I'm not gonna drown now. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Because I really do. I tell myself that a lot. Like, when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or stressed, one step at a time. I'm not gonna drown. Like, creating these small goals for myself, like the applying for 5 jobs a day, that really helped a lot. It was like, well, this is what I have control over. Really understanding what you can control and what you cannot control. And yeah, of course, I had sleepless nights. Like, who doesn't? Who doesn't stress out about stuff? But that's the only way for me to really manage the stress. That and exercise.
Nice. So what would you say, Steph, is your formula for successfully owning your career? What are the secret ingredients? What
Well, it's tough because I'm not an entrepreneur, right? I mean, I am not my own boss. I have many bosses. Actually, I have so many bosses. I've had 8 news directors in the course of my 14 years in the business. And so, I mean, that's, more than 2 bosses, or that's more than a boss every 2 years. So it's kind of crazy. It's a very transient business. So you have to understand, and it took me a while to learn this because, uh, I was young and immature and was from Boston and DC, and here I am in Georgia with the news director there. So it took me a while to learn, but really anticipating others' needs has been huge. And I would say taking risks, not afraid of taking risks, has been my other thing. So when I talk about anticipating people's needs, you need to understand what your boss wants before he asks for it or she asks for it. I've only had male boss news directors, so that's why I say he. But of course, bosses are men and women, thank God. But so yeah, so anticipating what they ask, or anticipating what they need before they ask for it. I feel like that's been very important, because they never want to hear, I want this, I want that, I want to get the promotion, I want more money, I want this. But what they do want to hear is, hey, I've got this for you. Or, hey, what can I do for you? What can I do to make this newsroom better? What can I do to improve the product? What do you need from me? That's all they want to hear. And my dad gave me that advice because my dad, owned his own company. And he built his own company. And so I'd ask him, I'm frustrated. I'm not getting this opportunity. I want to get on the anchor desk. They haven't given it to me yet. And he goes, Stephanie, just go in there, show your face every 2 weeks, say, what do you need from me? And I was like, all right, I can do that. And then do it, deliver on it. And or if there's a big story, if something big breaks in Connecticut, I always try and think about, okay, what could be a good exclusive? What could be another angle to this than the obvious? And pitch that, and make sure you pitch it and you don't give it to someone else who takes credit for your idea. That happens a lot. So you got to be careful. All of those things, that was that's been huge. And it took me, like I said, a long time to learn, like, bosses don't want to hear you complain. They just don't. Just because, and think about it, you don't want to hear someone complaining to you. So why do you think they want to hear you complain? So, but that's a way of kind of being a squeaky without being squeaky, like you're getting FaceTime with the boss, but they can't complain if you're like, what do you want from me? I'm here. What do you need? So I've always tried to be like that. And then, or once I understood that worked. And then, yeah, risk taking has been huge. I mean, I had to take risks. I had no choice. Like, this is television news. There's a lot of people applying for one job, and every news outlet, every market, they want the people on air, their reporters, which makes sense, to look like their community. So there's only so many slots for someone that looks like me to be on camera. And so I think, you have to be willing to go where the jobs are and try and thrive in that environment. And also, be happy away from family, which is not always easy. A lot of people, they cannot take that risk to be away from family. But I found, like, you find family where you go, and your family is always there. Like, they're only a phone call away. FaceTime, it's great. I think if a pandemic has taught us anything, is that you can stay connected without actually physically seeing each other. So yeah, so we did all that. I mean, it's been a wild ride, but I met my husband in Little Rock, Arkansas. and he's in Connecticut now. So you just never know, and you learn so much, like traveling around the country, getting out of your comfort zone. You really learn a lot, and you learn a lot about yourself, and that's really important for growth and for maturity. 'Cause I will tell you, when I first started, very immature.
I wonder, did you get some of the courage from going away to school?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I did. That was another risk. Talk about risk taking. I had an opportunity. I got accepted to Boston University, which was my grandmother's alma mater, and she was like, "Oh, you should." She put a lot of pressure on me to go to BU, and I don't know if I did it to defy her, but um, but I didn't. I was like, I think DC would be exciting, and I don't know, and it wasn't that far down the road, so I wasn't, in LA or anything. But yeah, that was also part of the journey, was taking that risk and going away to school too.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you said about don't be afraid to say, goodbye to family, because I can think back to my career, and I think that I was, not I think, I know I had that family attachment that I limited myself with how far I could go. So I only branched out to Quinnipiac. I think I got accepted to two schools, Quinnipiac and Johnson and Wales in Rhode Island. And I chose Quinnipiac because it was closer to home. So I can totally see your point about stepping out of your comfort zone and really embracing a new place. I love what you said.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard. And I get why people don't. There are reasons why people physically cannot leave their families. And I understand that. But if you can, if someone is around to take care of your, aging parents or whoever, you know, take getting out of your comfort zone is good. It's, it's great. I strongly recommend it. I highly recommend it for sure.
Wonderful. Do you feel like you get out of your comfort zone every day when you're getting in front of the camera?
Not now. I feel like the camera has become a comfort zone a little bit. Like I was on just off maternity leave, and so when I got back to work 3 weeks ago, it felt so good to be back in the driver's seat. I was like, oh, this is nice. Like I missed this, the rush and the excitement of news, and I missed it so much. And like you forget how much you miss it until you're back in it. But I would say like I try and do something new every birthday. I try and get out of my comfort zone and do something to develop me as a person, not necessarily professionally. But I would say this too about TV news. Like you're constantly out of your comfort zone because you have to pretend that you are an expert on something that you just learned about 8 hours previously. So that you're always in this like student mentality because you're as in journalism, you're always learning something new. You're always learning how the sausage is made at the Capitol, like how these laws are being formed and why they are the way they are, and who the players are involved and the politics of it all. And so like that's something that you're always kind of learning and trying to understand. And then you know it's taken me a while, but like finally I've also understood um, like police departments and the hierarchy there, and so you get sources, but you have to protect these sources because they're telling you information that could be put their job in jeopardy. So um, you're just, I don't know, you're constantly learning. It's kind of incredible, really. It's awesome, and also it kind of stinks because you're never really an expert in one thing. You're kind of just this like jack of all information in your head at all times. And then at the end of the day, like you don't need to use it again either. So it's a very, like, being a journalist is very odd. You learn all the intricacies of this one thing, and then all of a sudden the next day it's like, okay, on to the next one.
Someday it'll come back. Where
I
you
hope so.
need something like this. So I wonder, are there any resources that you found to be super helpful to you in taking ownership of your career that you can recommend to our audience?
I mean, the things that have been super helpful is just really building connections and keeping them. Send the Christmas cards to the former bosses. Send the thank you notes after someone helped you. All of those things. I mean, I know everyone always says it's not what you know, it's who you know, but at least in my career, I feel like who you know is so important. And I went into this completely blind. I didn't have any relatives in TV news. I didn't have anyone I could rely on. Um, so so that has been huge because the boss that hired me in Savannah, my first boss, the guy that took a chance on me, he hired me. He was just happened to be the news director at WTNH in New Haven. And so I saw the opening and I was like, hi, I'm available. Are or what's going on? My mom is 2 hours down the road in Boston. Like, Connecticut sounds good. And so, yeah, I would just say build those connections and send the thank you notes. I am a big proponent of making sure that if someone helps you, or if just in general, even if they, or just if you meet someone for the first time, it's just good to send a handwritten note. It sounds silly, but it takes 2 minutes, and throw the stamp on there, and it can be a great way for people to like really connect with you, and to show, to be memorable. How often do people get handwritten notes these days? Never. So if you get one, you remember it, and for a good reason. So that's good.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that, Steph, because I had Dr. Fred McKinney on during Black History Month, and he said the same thing about standing out with a handwritten thank you card. So you're reinforcing the message that the listeners have heard, those who have heard that interview.
And I also heard that Oprah does it too.
Uh,
So
have you met
it's good
Oprah?
with me.
Have you
What?
met her?
No, are you kidding me?
I'm not sure.
You would have to pick me up off the floor. I would starstruck. I don't know if I could handle that.
Well, it seems like you can make that happen. I don't know. That's a good goal. Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, as we begin to wrap up the interview, I'm wondering, you mentioned that you just had your second child and you're back from maternity leave. How is your career different, and how do you make it all work? Any tips for moms out there?
Oh my gosh. I always say we are surviving at this point, and I know that that might not be what people want to hear, but you just you have to just keep swimming. You cannot drown. So it has forced me to be more organized for sure, and really hour to hour schedule out my day, write things down in your calendar so you don't forget certain things and certain goals you want to do. And really, I would say, for me anyways, a physical calendar that you see, that is written out, and therefore, and you can at end of the week goals, put them on Saturday and Sunday, and then every day you have a constant reminder of like what you wanted to get done this week. And so all those things I need. For me, a visual reminder is so vitally important, and to get these like little small things. And this, I mean, it can be anything from like work out 3 times to sign up my daughter for pre-K, to I need to write this thank you note so I can try and get this exclusive interview for the station. Like any, like these little goals that you have to get done or want to get done. I love writing them on Saturday and Sunday because I don't actually want to do them on Saturday or Sunday, but I force myself to if I don't do them. But it's good to have that visual reminder of this is what I wanted to get done this week, and I will get it done. And it feels, I mean, there is nothing better when you cross something off the list. Oh,
Yes, yes, yes.
it feels so good.
It does. And you know what? I'm gonna be authentic here and say sometimes I write things on my list that I have done so that I can check it off.
Oh, yes, of course. People who are list makers do that all the time. Or like something really simple, like, I don't know, I put out my clothes for the next day. I'm like, yep.
Oh, I'm there with you. I have a flip chart, which I don't know how I didn't think of that before. I have a flip chart in my office. I have a whiteboard. I have a physical calendar. I use my iPhone list. So I am all on board with what you're saying, just to get it out of your mind and get it down on paper so that you can see what you need to do.
Yeah, that's been hugely helpful, at least for me being back at work. And I remember during the pandemic, I at one point I just threw my planner out in the trash because it was like, okay, none of these things are happening anymore. I need to start fresh, and I had to start like a whole new because everything had changed. It was a wacky year, but
It was, wasn't it?
2021 is going to be better. It's going to be better for everyone, and I'm going to be organized this year, and I hope everyone else is too.
By the way, Steph, I had written down on my notepad, keep swimming. And I heard you say that. So I think that's what's going to be the title of your episode, Keep Swimming.
All right. Just like Dory. I don't know. Maybe Disney has that copyrighted, but it is my motto. I'm not going to drown now. I like how I focus a little bit on the negative part of that. It's not keep swimming. It's I'm not going to drown. I've never drowned before, so it's not going to happen now.
Yeah. Well, you keep swimming, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Can you tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd like to do so?
Yes, I would love to. Please reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram, Steph Simoni. Twitter and Facebook is Stephanie Simoni. And I'm not on TikTok yet. I got to get cool. I'm not cool there. I'm a millennial, not a Gen Zer. I'm an old millennial at that. So so reach out that way. Or, I mean, my email address too. I check my emails all the time. Stephanie.simoni@WTNH.com. And of course, they can always watch on WCTX 9 and 10 Monday through Friday. So
wonderful. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you so much for asking me, Simone. It was a huge honor. I saw the other people that are on your podcast, and I just was like, ooh, I can't believe she's asking me.
Of course. You have an amazing story and a lot of wisdom that you shared with the audience. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thanks for telling everyone's good stories. I appreciate it.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.